Hi friends, welcome back to Keeping It Simple. This is our Sound Doctrine segment. And this week I wanna pose a question to you guys.
Okay.
All right? Do we, as believers in general, and ministers in a way, okay, we're ministers on this show. I mean, you know, you and I don't know about Mike, but you and I, believe we're called to preach.
Right.
And a minister that stands in a pulpit, or an apologist, or a theologian, or just as a Christian in general, do we have the responsibility to guard against false teachings?
Oh, well, that's an emphatic yes.
Yes, okay. I say yes. Okay, next segment.
Okay, but now let me step back for a minute here, and let me give the example I want to give, and then I'll let you guys comment, okay?
Okay.
And this is a little pet peeve of mine, and John knows very well. Faith healers.
Oh, Lord.
Okay,
Lord.
and I happened to stumble across a website today. The man said the 17 reasons why I left the tongues movement. Okay, and when he said tongues movement, what he was really referring to was the charismatic movement.
Right.
Okay, and he goes in here and he tells a long story. First off, this was reason 14. The excesses and deceptive practices condoned in the divine healing campaigns. Okay, and he goes through here and he tells, and look, John, you can just see how long the story is here.
Well, that's 4 complete pages and some change.
Okay, that's how long, and he said time did not permit for him to tell everything he had seen. Okay, so, and this was, if I say the name William Branham, you guys know who that is.
Well, I've heard of him because of you, but...
Okay, Mike G, do you know who I'm talking about, William Branham?
Yeah, I've heard that name.
Okay. This was in Canada back in 1947. Okay, and we're not talking about something that's a recent development. We're talking about something that's been going on for a long time. All right, William Branham came into his church. This was in Canada. Comes and has the big healing ceremony, and then they had it set up. They had dormitories at the college out back for the people that were on stretchers that couldn't walk up to wait in the healing lines. They took William Branham back through, took him into every room, took people's hands, made some kind of mumbo-jumbo remark, and said, "Brother, you're healed from cancer. You're healed from this. You're healed from that." And then guess what happens? Weeks later, Branham's gone. Guess what happens to all these people that were on the stretchers? They started dying off.
Yeah, because they were healed.
Right. Uh-huh. So, I mean, anybody that's listened to me more than once, you've heard me say that your faith has nothing to do with whether God can heal you or not. The apostles, when they healed somebody, bam, it was done. When Jesus healed you, bam, it was done. You look in the Old Testament.
Right.
When one of the prophets healed you, bam, it was done. It had nothing to do with the level of your faith, and you wonder why Jason in particular gets so mad about this, is because this is destroying the faith of weaker brethren.
Oh, absolutely.
That is exactly what it's doing, and you will answer to God for doing that when you get to heaven. Trust me, pal. And if you may answer right here, right now. Okay?
Yeah.
You're under the chastisement of God. The problem is, a lot of them, they're not even born again, so they're not going to get judgment until they die.
Well, yeah, that's why they're prospering now. Somebody teaching a blatant false doctrine that's prospering now, and the Lord is not chastening them, then maybe they're not His son.
Well, we could go into naming names here, but let me just, what do you guys think about that?
Well, let me say that me and Mike have both had pasts in charismatic churches. I attended one, played bass in the praise and worship band, so I'm very familiar with the whole charismatic movement personally, and a lot of it did destroy my faith. And let me go ahead and tell you why, because it was always, if you prayed for something, they thought, well, just because you were praying about it, then God ought to do it. And we know in 1 John teaches that is not true. If we ask anything according to His will, is what the Bible says. But see, we were asking things that we didn't know if it was His will. And we've talked about that in the Sound Doctrine segment. And so, when these things come to pass, and you're taught that just because you're a Christian and you ask and it's supposed to happen, and it doesn't happen, you think that you didn't really believe it. And you're like, and then you try to muster up some more faith and go through it again, and eventually it got to the point where I didn't even pray. It totally destroyed what faith I thought I had, and I'm telling you what, man, it's very, very dangerous. And concerning should we fight against false doctrine, the original question, absolutely, and maybe we'll get to some verses, but that is in Acts 20 and Jude verse 3, that we should absolutely fight against these false doctrines. But go ahead, Mike, what do you want to say to that?
Yeah, and just like you, John, I've had the background in the charismatic churches, and I've learned through my experience through the charismatic churches that I've been in, that there are two groups of people. You either have the spiritual elitists or the spiritually inferior. And I was among the spiritually inferior. Now, what I mean by this is you have the spiritual elite. Those are the ones that stand up, they preach, they lay hands on people, they fall down, they get a word from God, God speaks to them, and then they're like so super spiritual that you don't even want to go near them sometimes. And me being in the second group, the spiritually inferior, it's like when I would pray for people, I used to get so frustrated and say, well, nobody falls down when I pray for people. God doesn't speak to me. How come? We had a man who was a so-called prophet come to our church that one night, my former church, I should say, and he's going around picking people out of the church saying, God has a word for you, thus, this, and they were people that were pretty much prominent in the church or pretty well known in the church. So I figured he's got to come to me because I've been in this church for a long time and everybody knows me. But he passed me by, didn't say a word to me, and I left that church so upset and discouraged and like, God doesn't want to speak to me. God doesn't care about me. I'm not spiritual enough. I don't have enough faith. And that's the group I was in. And that's what the charismatic movement will do to people. I've seen it not just do it to me, I've seen it with other people too that said that, I pray and God never answers my prayer. I must not be faithful enough. And they get disillusioned, they get discouraged, and some of them even backslide and go back into the world. It is a very dangerous movement. It is, and I'll be as blunt to say it is out of the pits of hell. Out of the pits of hell. Satan is using this to infiltrate the church and deceive the people of God, and it is a very dangerous movement that more people ought to be getting up and contending for the faith as we ask the question and speaking out against it, because it really is. That's my pet peeve as well, is these faith healers and these word faith people and these spiritual elitists you see on TBN. TBN's my big crux. That's the thing that I have a big problem with is TBN, the TBNites, the spiritual elitists of the TBNites, as I call them.
Yeah, the spiritual elitist thing was big where I was at too. It wasn't as big, it sounds like, but it definitely had that. The guy with the word, the guy that always got his prayers answered, and they were making it up. But anyway.
Yeah, well, I'm going to tell you, fellas, I think we need to spend another week on this, so we're going to draw it to a close right now, and we'll next week on our Sound Doctrine segment on the next show, we'll talk about how we should guard against false teachings coming into the church, because that's the whole point of the Sound Doctrine segment anyway.
Absolutely.
Is fighting false doctrine. So we're going to go ahead and wrap this up right now. You guys hold on just a minute. We'll be right back with our To The Point segment. Hi, friends. Welcome back to Keeping It Simple. This is our Sound Doctrine segment, and we kind of left off last week in the Sound Doctrine segment. We were discussing the topic of should we as Christians confront false doctrine, or should we just let it go? And I read some stuff from the 14 reasons why the brother left the tongues movement, or why he stopped being a charismatic, basically. And you heard John and Mike give their personal testimony to that effect. And this week we kind of wanted to bring some verses in, okay? And let me start out by reading Romans 16:17.
Oh, your favorite.
Okay. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, mark them which cause divisions and offenses contrary to the doctrine which ye have learned, and avoid them. Now, let me quote that verse how TBN would quote that verse. Hold on, Mike, you'll get a kick out of this. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, mark them which cause division, and avoid them.
Yep, that's right.
That's it.
Now, what was the difference between those two verses there?
Took out the word contrary to the doctrine.
Exactly. So doctrine is important, isn't it?
Exactly.
Doctrine's key to everything.
Look, I did a study on it. It's on the website. You guys get on there, check it out, read it. You can't worship God in spirit and in truth unless you know right doctrine.
Right doctrine. That's right.